Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Part 1, Chapter 3, entitled The Lord's Pastimes out of Vrindavan. Anam Kodora Samtebhyo Dadva Bhagavat Apanam Gopiprata Sabasura Pranimo Bhuvi Buddhavihe Anam Kodora Samtebhyo Dadva Bhagavat Apanam Gopiprata Sabasura Nemo Bhuve Murabe Inam Kodora Samtebhyo Dadva Bhagavada Pranam Gopi Prata Sabasura Nemo Bhuve Murabe. Anam, foodstuff. Cha, also. Ururasam, highly delicious. Tebeya, unto the brahmanas. Dadva, after supplying. Bhagavat Apanam, which was first offered to the personality of Godhead. Go, cows. Vipra, brahmanas. Ata, purpose. Asava, purpose of living. Sura, overbrilliant Satyas. Pranemo, offered obeisances. Bhuvi, touching the ground. Murderbe, with their heads. Translation. Thereafter, they offered the Brahmanas highly delicious foodstuffs, first offered to the personality of Godhead, and offered their respectful obeisances by touching their heads to the ground. They lived perfectly by protecting their cows and the Brahmanas. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki? The behavior exhibited by the descendants of Yadu in the pilgrimage site of Prabhas was highly cultured and exactly to the point of human perfection. The perfection of human life is attained by following three principles of civilization: protecting the cows, maintaining the Brahminical culture, and above all, becoming a pure devotee of the Lord. Without becoming a devotee of the Lord, one cannot perfect one's human life. The perfection of human life is to be elevated into the spiritual world, where there is no birth, no death, no disease, and no old age. That is the highest perfectional aim of human life. Without this aim, any amount of material advancement in so-called comforts can only bring the defeat of the human form of life. Brahmanas and Vaishnavas do not accept any foodstuff which is not first offered to the personality of Godhead. Foodstuff offered to the Lord is accepted by the devotees as a mercy of the Lord. After all, the Lord supplies all kinds of foodstuff, both to the human being and to the other animals. A human being must be conscious of the fact that all foodstuffs, namely grains, vegetables, milk, water, etc., the prime necessities of life, are supplied for mankind by the Lord. And such foodstuffs cannot be manufactured by any scientist or materialist in a laboratory or factory established by human effort. The intelligent class of men are called Brahmanas, and those who have realized the absolute truth in his supreme personal feature are called Vaishnavas. But both of them accept foodstuffs, which are the remnants of sacrifice. Sacrifice is ultimately meant to satisfy the Yogya Purusha, Vishnu. In the Bhagavad Gita 3.13, it is said that one who accepts foodstuffs as the remnants of sacrifice is freed from all sinful reactions. And one who cooks foodstuff for maintenance of his body takes in all kinds of sin, which lead only to suffering. The foodstuffs prepared by the Yadus at the Prabhu pilgrimage site to offer to the bona fide Brahmanas there were all offered to the personality of Godhead Vishnu. The Yadus offered their sincere obeisances by touching their heads to the ground. The Yadus, or any enlightened family in the Vedic culture, are trained for the attainment of human perfection by total cooperation, the service between the different divisions of social order. The word Ururasham is also significant here. Hundreds of delicacies can be prepared simply by the combination of grains, vegetables, and milk. All such preparations are in the mode of goodness and therefore may be offered to the personality of Godhead. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita 2.26, the Lord accepts only foodstuff which are within the range of fruits, flowers, leaves, and liquids, provided they are offered in complete devotional service. Devotional service is the only criterion for a bona fide offering to the Lord. The Lord assures that he positively eats such foodstuffs offered by the devotees. So, judging from all sides, the Yadus were perfectly trained civilized persons, and their being cursed by the Brahmana sage was only by the desire of the Lord. The whole incident was a warning to all concerned that no one should behave lightly with Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. And that ends that purport. So we'll be going on to chapter 4 tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada Ki. So first I'd like to ask for the blessings of the senior devotees that I may say something of value today. My basis is to Srila Prabhupada and my spiritual master. So we see here that Srimad Bhagavatam is given the formula to live a perfect human life, and that is protecting the cows, maintaining the Brahminical culture, and becoming a pure devotee of the Lord. So the first subject I want to touch on today, which is an important one and everything runs off this, as it's very hard to see cows as they are and the Brahminical culture as they are if one's not a pure devotee of the Lord. I want to talk about becoming a pure devotee of the Lord first. When we're born into this material world, we're covered with new sense of identities, and that's very hard to get out of and become a devotee of the Lord. We have identities such as I am human, I am demigod, I am man, I am woman, I'm the Prime Minister of Australia, I'm the king of the world, I'm rich, I'm poor, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm strong, I'm weak. But these are all just identities that we put upon ourselves, and these are false identities called false ego. Another thing we have is false possessiveness. So that's a big one in the world today. This is my charter. This is my book, this is my kid, this is my house, this is my knowledge. And another big one in the world today is this is my land, that causes so many problems. But in a liberated state, when someone's achieved perfection, there is no I and mine. But in the material state, we have these artificial impositions. They're not real, they're illusionary, they're temporary, and they're a source of fleeting pleasure and pain. So we make so many endeavors here in the material world. We see so many different people taken to different spiritual paths, trying to attain the ultimate goal of life, trying to realize their true spiritual identity. In the Jaiva Dharma by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he talks about endeavours, and there's two endeavours which he talks about. One's inappropriate endeavours and one's appropriate endeavours while we're here within the material world. So he first touches on inappropriate endeavours. So this is for people who are on the journey of realising their true spiritual nature. He talks about karma kanda. He talks about meditating on the impersonal Brahma, taking shelter of impersonal Brahma, and thinking that I'm going to be free from this material contamination, I'm going to be free from Maya. Ashtanga yoga, going into trance, into samadhi. And he goes on to say that these certain practices, there's so many hurdles, there's so many obstacles which one may have to overcome. Then he points towards endeavours which are appropriate. And those appropriate endeavours which he talks about are association with devotees and surrender onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So once again, we're talking about leading us, of the living entity, to realising their true identity. So why association and why surrender onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Why are these called the appropriate ways, the appropriate endeavours to realising one's eternal nature? Through association, we get guidance. Through association, the mercy comes down. We get authority. We get direction. I'm sure we have, with you people moving onto the farm, they'll feel that when they come onto a farm and they've experienced so many different spiritual paths. They'll come here and they'll see how important that association is when one takes to the spiritual path. They get Lord Chaitanya. And the association of devotees is so important, and there's a story within the Sri Bhaktisiddhanta Vaibhav, which is a book about Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master, written by Bhakti Prakash Swami. And it's a very difficult time in Bhaktisiddhanta's life, and they're talking about the loss of two of the biggest figures in his life. So one being Bhaktivinoda Thakur and one being Gaurkishore Das Babaji. Both are on the wall next to Srila Prabhupada here. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur was about to leave his body, and Gaurkishore Das Babaji caught wind of this. And he sent one of the Kaska Swamis to Calcutta to tell Bhaktivinoda Thakur, please come back to the Holy Dham. You're about to leave your body in the Holy Dham. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, there's no reason to go back to the Holy Dham. I'm surrounded by devotees here at Calcutta, so there's no need to go to the Holy Dham, because where the devotees are, that place is the Holy Dham. So fortunate to be around the devotees, and it shows how potent association is. Then we have surrender. So surrender is very important. It's very hard for humans within the material world to surrender. We like to be the ones in control. We like to be the boss. We like to be the ones who lord it over. In the Bhagavad Gita, it states that this material energy is very difficult to overcome, but one who surrenders unto me can easily cross beyond it. And I was talking the other day in the car with Labanga, Lazika, and we were talking about this idea of surrendering and taking shelter of something else, and what is the difficulty about that? And we were speaking how in the past there's been things like slaves and people taking advantage of people. So we have this idea of surrendering onto someone else or taking shelter of someone else. There's kind of like this icky feeling about it. But actually surrendering onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead is our true nature. This is life. So we must take the correct endeavours in life upon our spiritual path and make it simple. I went to see my spiritual master the other night. He was just in Brisbane for one night, and he was talking about the simplicity of spiritual life. He was saying that back in the day when he first joined, I'm sure Ramai Swami he's been around 50 years. How long have you been in the 50 years? He's like, they joined the movement, it was fresh, it was just very simple. We're just chanting, reading Prabhupada's books, going out on the streets, giving the holy name and giving out books to the general public. So it wasn't complicated, it wasn't any overthinking, it was just doing it as it was, as Prabhupada laid it down to do. So it's very important. So all these are helping one realizing their true spiritual identity, which will then lead them to become a pure devotee. Then another aspect which is really important is humility. And I was having a chat with Krishna Bhakti Mataji during breakfast the other day, and we were talking about humility. And it's very interesting, and we were talking about a few devotees who have come in to New Govardhana over the last 7 years. And there's a few in particular who have really taken the Krishna consciousness really fast. They kind of get here, bang, and they're just like, do, and they take off. And we can really look at the attributes which they really have and what they have within their heart and what they've given other people. It's humility. So humility is such an important aspect of spiritual life. And there's a good example of humility. Srila Prabhupada, once again, leading by such a nice example. In the 4th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a story about Dhruva Maharaj. So Dhruva Maharaj is an extraordinary personality. And at the end of Dhruva Maharaj's life, he attains perfection. And the Vishnu Dutas come down to take Dhruva Maharaj back to the spiritual world. And Dhruva Maharaj says, no, I can't go back to the spiritual world. My mum, she was my original guru. She needs to come with me. I'm going to stay here. And the story goes on to say that through his practice, he's in spiritual endeavors, his mum also got the benefit, and she was behind him coming back to the spiritual world. But the humility part that I wanted to touch on was a purport which Srila Prabhupada writes within that chapter. And Srila Prabhupada writes that that's his goal. He's bringing his Krishna consciousness to the West. He's like, if only I could make one pure devotee, then that one pure devotee can take me back to the spiritual world. This is coming from Srila Prabhupada. So, so much humility. So what else while we're on our journey back to realizing our true spiritual identity? Showing up, also very important in spiritual life. I heard many senior devotees say to me, and I ask for advice, how does one advance in spiritual life? They like to show up every day. And you're halfway there just by showing up. So this devotional service is everything. Vasudeva Bhagavate Bhakti Yoga Prayojata Janayati Asu Vaivragyam Yanam Cha Yad Ahaitakam. By rendering devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from this material world. So we must endeavor in appropriate ways on our journey back towards Krishna. If we look at this material world, everything's fleeting, everything's rising, everything's falling. I'm sure many of us have experienced the material world earlier on in life, and we see how temporary things are. Happiness and distress coming and going. We may achieve something and all of a sudden it gets taken away. All the things that we desire most in the material world, when we achieve that, there's no real satisfaction to it. Tamal Krishna Goswami said once that the thing that we desire most in the material world is going to bring us the most amount of pain, which is very interesting. So we must direct things in the appropriate direction when I walk back to Krishna. So doing all of this, one becomes a devotee of the Lord. And once a devotee of the Lord, everything else starts to fall into place and we see things as they really are. So one of the biggest problems in the material world today is living entities, humans, lording it over other living entities. And one of those living entities in particular is the cow. And there's a few verses in the Srimad Bhagavatam which touches on the importance of the cows. But it's very hard to see this and understand this if one isn't a devotee of the Lord. So that's why it's so important for us to really endeavour to put ourselves in the best possible position to understand. So in the Bhagavatam 149, it states that to kill cows means to end civilization. So that's a pretty powerful snippet right there. And in 114.34, without cow protection and cultivation of Brahminical qualities in human society, at least for a section of the members of human society, no human civilization can prosper at any length. So it's so important. In the Bhagavad Gita, there's a verse 12:13. It says, "Avesta sava putana matla luna ivacha." And that verse talks about the qualities of a devotee which are very dear to the Lord. It goes on to say that one who is non-envious, one who is a kind friend to all living entities. So not just humans, but to all living entities. They're not affected by happiness or distress. They're satisfied, so they're dear to the Lord. So this is why it's stated in the verse how important becoming a pure devotee of the Lord, because we can understand these things, because the general public don't understand the importance of cows, of the Brahminical culture. The state of the cows kind of rolls off into the human society. So if the cows are protected, loved for, and cared for, human society then flourishes. So it's so, so important. And that's, at the moment, the cow team, Smritamrita being one of them, with KK, who couldn't make it today. Oh, Maggie's out there, one of the cow team. So there's something happening at the moment where they're going to have little weekend workshops, especially with devotees. That's something which we've been going to talk about lately, to really teach devotees about the cows and the importance of cows and their effect on our civilization as it is. As devotees, we've all come from a very, a background where we've been taught certain things. So we're very confused about how to see things within the material world, especially that of cows. So being able to go down there and learn about the cows is a very special thing. And if you do have time, you can go down there whenever. You just have to tell one of the girls and learn about cows, which is very important. So yeah, we must get the basics right, which I've touched on. I'd always say that getting the basics right is like a rugby league game. I played rugby league for 20 years, and the coach would always say, you just got to get the basics right in the game, and you'll have success. So that's like in Krishna consciousness. We've just got to keep it simple, get the basics right. We don't have to do any fancy stuff on the sides. Just show up, get the basics right, and we're on the right path to becoming the devotee of the Lord. Something my spiritual master touched on the other day was being loyal to Srila Prabhupada. This is really important on our journey to realizing our true self. So once we take initiation, we've given our hearts to Srila Prabhupada. We're willing to do anything possible for Srila Prabhupada. The next up would be becoming a role model within Krishna consciousness and a leader within the movement. There's so many distractions within the material world right now, especially online. And there's so many things what get put out there just about the world in general, but also about the devotee community. So there's lots of things online, people arguing each other, people putting out their point of views on certain topics. But if we really want to push forward Srila Prabhupada's movement, if we really want to see this go to places where Srila Prabhupada would have wanted it to be, we have to be good leaders and good role models. And that's much more than just going online and complaining about certain things. That's more than just having our point of view or having arguments with certain people. It's about leading by example. So that's about showing up. That's about having beautiful relationships with devotees. That's about reading Prabhupada's books. There's so much service to do all around the world for Prabhupada. So we can be fully engaged in his service. And when you're fully engaged in Prabhupada's service, you can't really see these matters. And being a good role model, because this is what people are attracted to. We see that the world, there's so much distress, there's so much suffering within the material world. And a lot of that stress and suffering is coming from this mistreatment of cows and mistreatment of self. But if the society in general have good role models, just like Srila Prabhupada was for the whole world, then those role models, they actually attract more people to Krishna consciousness. Devotees should be happy, we should be blissful. This is what a devotee is. And yes, there's going to be distress within the material world. There's always going to be bad eggs which pop up. There's always going to be little problems within the material world. That's the material world. There's always going to be these little problems. But we have to rise above that. And I'm sure that's what Prabhupada would like. He would like us to rise above that and be good leaders and be good role models. Because, there could be a chance that the material world is going to have more problems in the future, and there's going to be more distress going on. So it's up to us devotees. Any questions?
Yeah, I was going to say the same.
It's something during Kartik, it was something I really meditated on, was deepening one's own spiritual practice by just the little things. You'll see in Krishna consciousness, you come to understand how important one's consciousness is, and it's affected by just the most littlest things, either good or in a negative way. So we have to endeavor every day, and these are these appropriate endeavors to direct our consciousness in these positive directions, because there's so many distractions here and our mind can be taken away. It's just the littlest things. If you miss reading, or you're not listening enough, or you're not getting the right association, or you're focusing your mind on really disturbing matters, or watching certain things that you shouldn't be watching. All of these kind of things have a big effect on one's consciousness. So it's like a garden. You've got to really protect it, and you've got to really nurture it. And that's one thing that I've really focused on over Kartik, is really nurturing one's consciousness and just doing little things each day which can improve it. And that makes a huge, huge difference in one's spiritual life. And the other one which I just touched on then was This ISKCON is Srila Prabhupada's body, and it's our responsibility as devotees to take care of that. And the best way to do that isn't so much by using our words, whether out there or online. It's by our example. Saint Francis of Assisi was a great saint in the 14th century, and he said, always preach, and when needed, use your words. So he's going towards that. Our personal example and us being a role model is the most important thing. And that is what people are looking at the end of the day. You can speak so many words, you can say this, you can say that, but at the end of the day, people are going to be looking at one's actions. And that's the most important thing. And that if there are problems within the world, if there are problems within the community, it's our example and us being a role model which brings that up. That's the best thing we can do, definitely. Yeah. If KK was here, he would have had something to say for sure about the cows. But yeah.
So you're talking about like the garden, like the consciousness
Mm.
garden, like how do you personally guard against the weeds, or how do you?
I think I touched on this last class, but it's like building something. Like in the gym, you would build like your muscles. You want to get big biceps, you have to do bicep curls. So it's the same. You just got to always be aware and always try to tweak that when that comes up. It's good to set time each day to do certain things, to have like a schedule, and that kind of protects one's consciousness. But yeah, it's so important in spiritual life to really protect that consciousness and direct it towards spiritual conscious things. My spiritual master the other night, the Krishna Maharaj, he was talking about when one gets onto the Ruchi platform. So when one's operating on the Ruchi platform, they're always thinking about Krishna. They're always chanting Krishna's names. They always want to hear about Krishna. And he goes on to say that they can't even think of Maya, so these other activities. So their consciousness is so strong. And this is what it's talking about here. If one's consciousness isn't strong, if one's consciousness isn't directed in this direction, the world then falls apart because no one's got the understanding, the right understanding. You know, cows are to be worshipped. You know, in the spiritual world, in Goloka Vrindavan, that's what Krishna does. He runs around with the cows. He loves cows. That's what God does. This is what happens in the spiritual world. But here in the material world, of course, we have this thing within us where we want to lord it over everything. We want to be the ones in control. And because we want to satisfy our own tongues, we're going to kill the cows and we're going to eat the cows for our own satisfaction. And there's so much unhappiness within the material world. There's so much destruction and so many things are going wrong. And people ask why. And this is one of the biggest reasons why. The Supreme Personality of Godhead loves cows. And we just think that we can kill cows and eat them for our own pleasure. But it's very hard to understand. Like, people who kill cows or people who hurt cows and people who eat cows, they don't understand this. It's very hard. So it's so important for devotees to make the appropriate endeavors in their own spiritual life and be role models and be good examples and be leaders. And through that, people get inspired. Through that, people are going to get the right teachings and people are going to learn. And the more people that learn about this, the better it is for the world at large. It's said in this, in the Bhagavatam, it says that to kill cows means the end of civilization. So the civilization just keeps going down, down, down. But because we're so puffed up as a civilization, we think that we're great. We think, oh, we're building rocket ships to go to the moon. We're doing this, we're doing that. We're building big factories. I've made $1 billion. But in reality, civilization is just collapsing. So it's very important for us as devotees or aspiring devotees to be the example. Then it just keeps branching out. People are learning, people are getting the right information. It says in here also, to offer one's boga, to offer our foods, grains, our preparations that we make, we should offer to the Lord, because everything is coming from the Lord. So we should always offer our foodstuffs to the Lord, and then that becomes prasadam, and once again that purifies the heart. One thing on prasadam, Srila Prabhupada said that Australia will make devotees by prasadam. So Australians love their food. So any more? Yes?
I'll just share a question. Like your point of being like the example, like Shastra might be too difficult for somebody to
Yeah.
because cows might be difficult to understand, but our example is what needs to be led. Like yesterday, I was talking to my therapist, and he's not a devotee, and I just can't help but talk about bulls and like how they're making. And so he asked me to send some like pictures and videos and stuff of them. And the one thing that he kept saying was just like in reply, I was like, "They're so beautiful." Like it was kind of like this realization where we, especially people living in cities like here, we don't see cows, and if we do, we see that it's such an impersonal farming system that there's and we almost don't let ourselves fall in love with them because we know they're not going to a good place. Because then we'll start to feel something and then inflict it. So it was very interesting that was his reaction. Like how beautiful they actually are.
Cow therapy is very powerful. At the end of the day, everyone does care. There's so many people in this world, they do care. Everyone has a heart. Everyone has a beautiful. It's there, but there's just been so contaminated by what we learn. We grow up. There's so many things on TV. Our families telling us this and that, but another thing my spiritual master said the other night, when people are telling you stuff, when people are teaching you stuff, when people are trying to direct you in a certain direction, you have to ask them, where are you getting your information from? Because these days, in the material world, most people are making up their own information, or just by a book which just got written like last week, and people are living their life by these books. But the Vedic culture, these books, this is Sastra, Sadhu. So we go through the books, we go through the sadhus, and we go through the association. That's how we learn. If it comes from that, this is reality. So some people might say, it's okay, I want to build muscle, so I'm going to eat cows for my own. But this is just made up philosophy. It says it right here: to kill cows means to end civilization. So if anyone reads that and understands that, they see it for as it is. Oh wow, I'm going to actually stop eating cows because I actually care for my friends. I love my parents. I love the place where I come from. So it's so important. And these days, there's so many different philosophies and things that people bring out, which is just like, rainbows and unicorns. It's just to people's own liking. No happiness can come from that. Our happiness, it also states in the scriptures that our happiness comes from this, so the protection of the cows. And that's why people come to New Govardhana. People cross that bridge, and as soon as they cross that bridge, they feel something. Something changes within the air. It's because Krishna's getting worship here, but also that we're protecting and looking after cows and bulls. And it's so important. So may this spread. And it's not getting caught up in all these other little things. We must always be strong, lead by example, and be a leader. Because things are always going to happen. We can't get caught on these little things within the material world. No matter where you are, no matter what country you're in, There's going to be certain people will pop up which are going to cause problems. There's going to be certain statements said which are going to cause problems. There's going to be certain things written which cause problems. But the best weapon against that is our own example, our own leadership, and our own preaching. So if you've got time today, you can go and spend some time with a cow. You can go and feed a cow, and give the cows the love that they deserve. They're so dear to Krishna. This is actually what we're working towards as devotees. As devotees, we're doing our service. Nima right here, she's making ghee wicks for Krishna. But deep down, she's like, if I do this for the rest of my life, I'm going to end up in Goloka Vrindavan. And when you're in Goloka Vrindavan, this is what you do every day. You're doing service towards Krishna every day. This is our true constitutional position, Jaiva Dharma. And while we're doing this, there's just millions of cows getting looked after by the cowherd men and the cowherd girls. And it's just so blissful and so joyful. Everything's just so warped here within the material world. So let's keep the important thing, which is working towards realizing our own spiritual identity, which is a servant of Krishna. And every day, taking care of that garden, which is our consciousness. And it can be difficult because there's so many distractions within the material world, but we are lucky here at New Govardhana. We are kind of sheltered, so it is a good place to practice Krishna consciousness. And be a good role model and a good example. Because it's the role models and the examples that make changes in this material world. Srila Prabhupada ki